Hello and welcome to New Kevin Smith, The Great Witness, the New Adventure Series is show. And Kevin will be sharing his real side experiences with us, and we'll be commenting and asking questions. So welcome, Kevin.
Very often, as I've recounted previously, when we have real side experiences, we often revisit experiences we once had before, either real side experiences from childhood, real side experiences from other lifetimes, or real side experiences that are flashbacks of other physical level lifetimes. Because what tends to happen is, the moment we have the revisited experience, it is familiar to us, and we know we have had it before. The personal self can only know of the experiences it has had on the physical and the real side from this current lifetime. As anything other than this lifetime, then the references are stored beyond the range of our accessible memory mental vehicle files. Though, because everything is contained in the causal memory, this may sometimes be the cause of stirrings of familiarity. But generally, then, it is the real awareness that has access and oversees every creational lifetime ever lived. So it's not about the memory of having been to what are past lifetimes and past lifetime real side experiences, but the real awareness we are standing in that recognizes the real side experience as a revisit or rerun. In this real side experience, it was rather a combination. It seemed to be a flashback to a series of real side experiences I once had over a period of time, but a series of real side experiences from another dimension or place in creation than where I am positioned now. Interestingly, the series of real side experiences from this other dimension stemmed from an actual physical level event that once took place also. And just like certain events that occur on the physical, whenever or wherever they did, these can be shown to us on the real side for whatever reasons the guides have for doing so. So this was the situation here. Back then, the real side experiences would always be of me in the form of a young boy, around the age of 10 to 12, I would say, and always I was a part of some school. The school was vast, a typical schooling system of one-dimensional literal indoctrination, the teachers very fierce and overbearing, authoritarian, controlling types. The experiences would always be random occurrences within this school, just general activities, lessons, and the learning of useless information you tend to find with such places. The only curiosity always was how, even though I was in the age range of 10 to 12, I knew that somehow my age was actually 70 or so, and what seemed to have happened is that my physical body never changed. It seemed to have stuck at the age of 10 to 12. This was a secret that no teacher or fellow student was aware of, and of course, as time went by, so as not to arouse suspicions as to why my body wasn't changing as the years rolled on, I would have to keep switching schools, and rather start over again. I'm uncertain, back when I was having these real side experiences, from whichever lifetime it was, why this was so, and perhaps back then I may not even have considered that there was any significance with these dreams, maybe not realizing that they were expressions and viewpoints of something that had actually taken place in another lifetime, aside from the other dimension and position I was having these real side experiences from. Also, in these experiences, I had extraordinary psychic abilities. I could pretty much do anything I wanted in regards to manipulating a creation through my etheric vehicle, and this I wouldn't keep secret. I would blatantly flaunt my abilities, much to the dismay and irritation of the teachers, but to the awe and amazement of the other students, and naturally I was rather popular as a result. And as I said, my body was stuck at the age it was, but my 70 or so years had allowed the amassing of quite a memory full of information, so it could be said I was very wise or knowledgeable beyond my years, so was in a position where I always would counsel and advise these other children, who lacked the same extent of current lifetime references, and having been through 70 years then of endless schooling, I was rather adept at the marshalling of all the one-dimensional facts the children were expected to learn and produce on demand, so constantly I was assisting them, providing them answers, helping them with homework, etc. And as I said, these real side experiences continued for maybe years from this other dimensional lifetime position, and never seemed to have any resolution or provide explanation as for these curious circumstances. And now, several months ago, in this current lifetime, I returned again to these real side experiences from wherever lifetime I had been having them. Again, I was the same 10 to 12-year-old boy, in the same school, and again knowing I was actually around the age of 70, but stuck in a body that never aged, with the same psychic manipulational abilities. But as with everything we are shown, there is a reason for it, an opportunity, and especially as we decide to become more aware and recognize the is, so then every experience can be then utilized to this end. As comparisons for recognition and as experiences, we can become more aware through, as we are shown that which we haven't seen before. For in this real side experience now, my real awareness, that which perhaps I hadn't had the connection with when I had these experiences before, afforded me the impressions that this was a real side experience, that rather pointed to something that had actually occurred on the physical level in another dimension or place in creation, that I had in fact had a lifetime as a boy trapped in a never-aging body, but that there had indeed been a reason for this. The real awareness impressions afforded to my personal self would reveal that in another dimension on the physical level, very similar to our own, with variations through cause and effect, overall decisions that effected then this different parallel dimension, that around the date of 1955, a school had been purposely burned to the ground by some demonic type creature of considerable creational power, the purpose of which seemed to be that this demonic character could somehow seize the children on transition and take them to some forbidding area of the lower astral, for whatever reason he had for doing so. Evidently agreements through the children, that they were subconscious of most likely, facilitated this situation, the event, and the potential kidnapping, as nothing can take place in our experience without our decision, our express permission that it can be so. My impressions were that these children were rather special, in that they were perhaps about to step up, to become more aware, and be very instrumental in their participation with the promoting of the is, and in their assisting and providing others with the opportunity to become more aware also as they grew older and continued on the physical. But the agreements in their consciousness that they were unaware of, as we all have these agreements that can be taken advantage of in regards to imposition into our experience, allowed a window whereby the dark forces, seeing that these children would be deciding this, and with dark forces always seeking to intimidate, put off, and eliminate anyone who does try and extricate themselves from their designed controlling matrix, and encourage others to do likewise, would make their move, sending a demonic agent to set this fire, cause the children to transition, and remove the children from a position where they could share and promote the ears on the physical by taking them to the lower astral. But it seemed the real guides had other plans, for although they can't interfere with the decisions and agreements we make, perhaps the children did desire help, to agree for assistance. They recognized their situation, and that they could be helped if they extended permission, that help could be provided. The assistance took a curious form, for in this school burning, in this dimension where it took place on the physical, I was one of these children and should have died. I should have been consumed in the flames and kidnapped by the demonic creature with the others. But at the time, I too was either on my process of awareness or about to begin, as were the other children there, again revealing the multi-dimensional nature of ourselves, and how our decision to become more aware spins off across multi-dimensional creation in all the various forms and ways that it does, and that there are, of course, points in creation where we have decided to become more aware, then forfeited the journey and taken it up again at another point where the opportunity presented itself and the real references were made available. And so it's as though my real awareness arranged with the guides at the time that my created physical vehicle would be spared, and my physical life perpetuated, and somehow my surviving prevented the children who did get killed in the fire from being taken by the demon. I can't really explain how this was so, but it's as though the awareness of the children on transition were somehow trapped between the physical and their next life position, almost like ghosts, and this may have seemed not very favourable, but due to the children's subconscious agreements, their next position would have been the lower astral in the possession of the demon. The children had extended agreement enough for rescue, but only enough, it seems, that the best that could be done given the parameters of the children's agreements and decisions was to hold them in a kind of a position between the physical and the lower astral, where they were safe from the lower astral and the demon, but still trapped, like a stalemate. Somehow my being allowed to survive the fire perpetuated the stalemate, as though a tug of war, with me on one end and the demon on the other, and as long as I lived, so the children would be safe, albeit trapped. And so, not only was I to live to keep the children from the demon, but was afforded a very long lifespan. I'm uncertain how long it would have been for, how long this stalemate was required to be perpetuated, as the demon seemed to be in it for the long game. As a consequence, my physical body never would age beyond 10 to 12, and so I would be constantly switching schools and trying to keep this situation a secret for as long as was required in that lifetime. I'm uncertain as to the extent to how much I knew of all these particulars back when this actually took place, for these impressions were afforded me now on this real side experience several months ago. And so, whatever happened in that lifetime, however it ended, it would be then in another lifetime position where I would have the succession of continued real side experiences of being the 12-year-old boy in the schools that never aged. But of course, with those real side experiences back then, I would never understand as to what they represented. I had no indication that they stemmed from a lifetime once lived. But now, in this recent, current lifetime, real side experience, armed with all the information, I realized I was now to set things straight. For on the real side, we can revisit experiences wherever or whenever they happened. We can also cause alterations that will then ripple through cause and effect creation and perhaps beneficially change what once took place, if it indeed makes sense with life and awareness to do so. For I'm uncertain what became of the children who were trapped between dimensions, but it would have curtailed their process and maybe offset it detrimentally, a situation that was unnecessary, and yet according to agreement. But now it's as though an opportunity was available to access this occurrence and change it through the real awareness nowness position of the ears, where every experience can be found. And maybe I was shown these real side experiences of that lifetime from the other lifetime position before for that very reason, but lacked the awareness and the intent to act on that which was being revealed. And so, apprised of the situation, the scene would change. No longer was I in a 10 to 12-year-old body or in the school. I was in my usual body form, and gathered around me were the very children who had been trapped between dimensions. My impressions were that they still were trapped, but these were more their real awareness selves I was with, and together we were going to extricate the little personal selves of these children from their predicament. Also accompanying us were a group of adults of varying degrees of awareness, along to accompany us for the experience rather than be a necessity for it, as though they would benefit awareness-wise from observing what transpired, but beyond that they wouldn't be participating. And who knows, maybe in some dimension or place, these adults had a real side experience where they witnessed what transpired here and would maybe be reporting it back to a dimensional version of Dwayne on a Skype too. The adults had endless questions over considering this, puzzling over that, as I explained the situation as to what we were doing and why. After a while, I became bored of their questions, and instead just spoke to them all about the structure of creation and the real references that pertain to the ears. Based on their range of incredulity to confusion, these didn't seem especially aware people, but they seemed to be here, and were not being disruptive or interfering, nor did I have the impression of ill intent or any sense they represented the dark forces or were working on behalf of them. We had this moment to speak and dialogue and discuss. As it seemed, we had to wait a few moments. I had these charts, which depicted what seemed to be energy bars that were gradually rising, and these represented the trapped children, the personal selves of the real awarenesses of the children in the group. For the children hadn't really got very far in their awareness process. As before they had barely begun, they had been killed and almost kidnapped, and they, being dimensionally trapped, had put their awareness process on ice. But as with the children generally, a greater connection with their real awareness is so, as they haven't been absorbed into the literal consciousness quite so thoroughly as they would had they continued on in their schooling systems. And it was as though the real awareness of the children were connecting with their personal self-awarenesses that were dimensionally trapped and preparing them for rescue, and this very much was represented as the bars of energy gradually rising. Each bar represented each trapped child, and despite increasing at varying rates and speeds, all the bars were increasing, and we were to wait until all had reached 100%. In other words, the personal self-awareness of each child needed to be 100% intented and decided as to their rescue, and thus it could be so, and then the real awareness of the children and I could act, accompanied by this group of adults, who were in just an observing capacity for their own awareness process. And so we had a long and arduous journey seemingly, as though the personal selves of the children agreed to their rescue, but there were certain particulars involved that presented as though it were not an easy, straightforward extraction, as though we had to jump through a lot of hoops, and work around the children's personal self-decided obstacles as a result, although not deliberate, conscious agreement obstacles, more subconscious and unrealized, I would say. But overall, the rescue was agreed to and made possible. I pointed across the barren landscape we were faced with, and in the distance was a vast mountain that we would have to scale to reach a location that presented as where the personal selves of the children were held. Walking would be rather boring, so all the real awareness of the children transformed themselves into various winged creatures, everything from dragons to unicorns to phoenixes. I decided to transform myself into a flying saucer as a novelty, and we all took flight and began our journey. We rather kept low to the ground, however, as the adults of our group seemed unable to alter their body forms and were resigned to walking, as though they decided to be as restricted and limited as they are on the physical. Part way along our journey, we came across a burned out and gutted building, and this was a representation of the school that had once been deliberately burned in the 1955 on the physical of wherever dimensionally it had. We would take the moment to wander inside, and the experience of doing so, very poignant and intense for my personal self, as it remembered the terror and fear at the time of the fire. For even though I was allowed to survive, I wouldn't have realized it during and in the midst of the blaze. And then we continued. We made it to the base of the mountain. The various winged body types of the children and my spaceship body allowed an easy ascension, but the adults were having a difficult time of it with their limited human body types and inability to change them. So I agreed that instead of an uphill climb, we would rather spiral around and upwards like a helter-skelter, as this made the task easier for those lacking wings. Finally, we came upon a part of the mountain, not the top of it, but a large flattened plateau that contained in its centre a curious stone monument. It looked like a mini Stonehenge. Also around the monument were droves of humans that were in the midst of what seemed to be a ceremony of a kind, raising their hands to the skies, uttering nonsensical babble, all dressed in robes and such. My impression was that these people were worshippers of the dark forces, and specifically the very demon who had burned the school and tried to seize the children. Also, they seemed to know and were fully conscious of what it was they were devoted to, so they were along the lines of ill-intended dark force Satanists. Like with any being or individual, It is agreement that bolsters them and maintains their positions of power. And here was an example of the agreeable worship of a demon that allowed it to maintain its position of power over these individuals, and whoever else was consciously or subconsciously in agreement with the demonic creature. The worshippers seemed oblivious of our presence, so wrapped were they in their ceremony, and at one point they became completely prone and stationary, as though someone had switched them off. And interestingly, each individual had beside them, hovering in the air, a kind of device that had a red light flashing, and my impression was that the red light had rather caused them to become stationary and inactive. But if the light switched to green, they would be activated again, and also be motivated to attack us. It really was as though the demon had complete control over his followers, maybe even through technology, as the distorted frequencies of the lower astral, where he resided, are the same as those utilized in the various technologies of the physical. And so there can be a connection and interface between the two dimensions through the physical level technology frequencies that align with the lower astral, and perhaps then control to this extent be achievable by such a demonic entity, especially coupled with the conscious agreement these devotees had extended to him. The mini monument in the center of this gathering actually represented the position the personal selves of the children still were trapped within, between the physical and the lower astral clutches of the demon, as though over time this situation, as it had disallowed the process of awareness to continue with the children, as it had rather stagnated and brought it to a standstill, it's as though the awareness had become rigid, fossilized, unmoving, and represented here as a monument of stone. And so the idea was that I would gather tremendous energy to myself and destroy this stone monument, which would represent the setting free of the personal selves of these trapped children, and allowing them to move on to their next position. And it wouldn't be the lower astral either. The demon would be denied, as though the time the children had been trapped had worked through what would have been the effects of having the lower astral experience, as though the cause and effect agreement karma, even subconscious as it may have been, had been worked off, and as such they were at liberty to move on. And as their intent for is recognition was maintained, they would be positioned in accordance with their real intent that makes most sense for their individual and respective awareness journeys. And as I prepared to destroy the monument. The worshippers of the demon became activated. Their lights turned green, as evidently the demon sought to thwart this rescue. But the real awareness beings of the personal self children were on hand and prepared to combat the worshippers, allowing me time to destroy the monument of containment. Through their superior capability that a real awareness has over any creationally based and personal self immersed and operating from individual. There the experience would end. I wouldn't actually see the completion of our assignment, but my impressions were that we had been successful, and perhaps there is more to be shown at a later stage on the real side. Duane the great writer responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "That experience shows a lot of what we go through all the lifetimes, and then to wake up. And yes, the children are precious."
While you're talking, I just was looking at creation and how fluid it is, and how we have these thoughts and ideas and we send them out, or just every thought we have is sent out into creation, and it can be activated by ourselves or other people, or an experience. And you describe very good in detail how the multidimensional creation operates. For other people, they get the idea how things work. I mean, they try. It's difficult without the background, but you can see how things are everything is out there in creation, and just a matter of like the agreement that we have with it to activate it and then to utilize it for us to wake up, for others to wake up. But you demonstrate very good how this all works, and that's why we have this show. I was telling my friend here how everything is a lie in creation, and Duane was talking about this like the other night, how even our feelings are a lie. Everything is in this matrix is a lie, basically. Don't get me wrong that it's negated. It's not real. It's just something we create or agree to. And we need it, as in our personal self, we need these experiences to wake up to the real universes and to who we really are. But everything basically here is made up, and it's for our benefit, that people see it as realities.
In this real side experience, the scene would be a beach setting in some position on the physical I was unfamiliar with, though the backdrop was that of a city. There were vast crowds of individuals along the stretch of beach, as though waiting in anticipation for something to take place. The only other feature of this experience at this point was a very large balloon, like an advertising blimp, suspended in the sky above the crowds. It was several 100 feet in diameter, I would have estimated, and was of the design of a flying saucer, like two bowls placed together, and a central section between them that looked like a series of windows or viewing portals. It was altogether a very realistic flying saucer balloon, but my impressions were that everyone present on the beaches knew that this is what it was, that it was a balloon. Overlooking the scene, and standing high up on a kind of a pier that ran from the beach and away into the sea, would be Val, and he would be watching on from this vantage point. It was then that I activated something. I had the sense of this, though my personal self not grasping the specifics of what I was doing, but the result was of another balloon, not as large as the flying saucer one, but still of a fair size, and it would rise into the sky and take its place beside the flying saucer balloon. This new balloon would revolve, and as it did so, additional detail would continue to emerge on its surface. Color, a few shapes, and then the words NUUU would form, in large lettering easily perceivable from the ground. My impressions were that with balloons of this type, they tend to serve as advertisements, to promote whatever they are designed for. The NUUU balloon quite apparent as then, representing the promoting and sharing of the sound that is the connection to the true reality. And as this was a creationally physical based scene, so it suggested the greater acceptance and agreement on the physical by the large crowds gathered here, as the NUUU featured then in their experience. For everyone has been approached on the real side by the guides, and given the opportunity of becoming more aware and recognizing the ears, but it must of course filter through to the physical. Decision and agreement must be so through the personal selves for something to feature on the physical level. So as with the UNUversities and the vessels, they are present on the real side, as anything anyone decides is instantly so on the real side of life, but to bring it through to the physical, the personal self, that which effects the simulation, must agree for it to feature in their experience. And something that will feature in collective, overall human physical level experience must be agreed to by the overall personal self masses. The ears is in creation, but the extent to which the references that pertain to it can feature on the physical level is based on agreement, as the objective is to bringing the UNUversities and vessels into a physical level actuality. And on previous real side experiences I have shared, I have seen these UNUversities in operation on the physical in future views. So it does seem that agreement is such, and as it currently stands, that these will be so, and that the NUUU song will become known on a vaster scale than it currently is. For I also saw other similar advertising balloons with all its references in these previous future view real side experiences also, and this scene suggested that agreement is maintained that will facilitate the emergence of the physical level operations, the promotion of the guides and the ears on a greater scale. It just takes a few moments for it to be so, as is the nature of the process of cause agreements to effect experience on the physical. But also, as much as this large balloon represented then acceptance and agreement that the promotion of the ears and the NUUU song will be more so on the physical, as it was in full view of all these individuals at this beach location. So it was interesting that the NUUU balloon was beside the flying saucer balloon. In the real side experience I shared recently, there was the alien ship arrival taking place in my street, with all the agreeable and prepared onlookers, suggesting that agreement is secured for the arrival of these aliens, with also my impressions being that these aliens represented that which was beneficial to life, and indeed was backed and orchestrated and arranged by the real guides. The very fact that the NUUU balloon was placed beside the flying saucer balloon in this experience indicated verification of again that both the alien arrival and the NUUU, the ears, is being promoted, accepted, agreed upon, and that the two are intertwined, interconnected, in that the aliens that are coming do represent that which makes sense with life. And as I said, with both balloons in full view of this large crowd here, agreement was still maintained for the presence of both on the physical. The setting had switched to a night scene, and what happened then was still a further verification of this impending life and guides-backed alien arrival, as a gigantic flying saucer, exactly the same design as that of the saucer balloon, would glide into view and hover above all the excitable masses, who pointed, gasped, and cheered. This saucer could have easily been 1,000 feet wide. It was huge, and was accepted with open arms, as it were. So the balloon did indeed represent promotion of, the extending of agreement to the possibility of an alien arrival that was beneficial with the whole of life, as indicated by the presence also of the NUUU balloon beside it, and agreement evidently was so, that one of the craft now made its presence known. And as a future view, this could have been anywhere on earth really, as this event is set to be a global occurrence. All future views present what is being decided at the moment we receive them on the real side. But cause and effect must play out on the physical, and so future views do not always come to pass if agreement fluctuates, but this agreement seems to be maintained, and so this alien arrival event is still set to take place. The scene switched, and I was briefly in the company of a large number of aware individuals, as were my impression. The vast majority my personal self couldn't identify, but I did recognize Peter, my father, and Dwayne also was in attendance. We all were discussing various projects and ideas for the promotion of the ears in creation, which again shows how what we are doing in regards to sharing the ears is a constant on the physical and on the real side of life. And as is the case, decisions and ideas are created first on the real side as thought, imagination, and then filters through to the physical, that the personal self then activates the creations, that the effects can be available. Effects that will be the various creative ways we each decide to share and promote the ears by, that others can become more aware through, and so we earn our way, we earn our recognition of the ears. Dwayne, the great writer, responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "It's all leading up to this, because of what's happening in the world, and the vaccines, what all the knuckleheads are promoting and pushing. It's going to be pretty strong stuff here. We will see what happens. And yes, on the real side, we need agreement. I had agreement from Enlil and Enki several years ago, but as the two main seers backed off, they backed off also, so we must realign things here. These experiences reveal more options than just dealing with these situations. We can vacate the planet, those who are aware and willing to go, etc.
Well, when did you have this experience? How long ago was this?
This was July the 12th, I think, so it's fairly recently. Well, I had the experience far earlier than that, but I didn't get around to sharing it till July the 12th, so this was more likely one that I had probably early June, but still relatively recently.
Like we say, everything, changes. Free will is in play here in creation. I want to say also that, well, Dwayne, again, he reminded us creation is very convincing. Everything here is so real, looking, feeling, everything is so real, and it is real in its own way, its own reality, but it's only creation, it's whatever in a way as well, because we're looking to use it to recognize and to perceive this isness. And that's what we're always pointing to, this reality that just is. And creation is just part of this way to recognize what it isn't. Very simple in a way, but it's hard to get through ourselves and all our convictions to really see this, and that's for everybody pretty much. And we always, it's a constant dealing with our personal selves and all the things that we've created and all the things we've accepted from others too, to get through this matrix life here. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Then that's it for today. Thanks again, Kevin, for sharing with us. And again, I just like the way that you navigate through the real side. You know, you're proficient in this, and you can share how, if people do find themselves on the real side, gives us tips and gives us hints and guidelines, you could say, to how to maneuver on the real side, because we are multidimensional beings and we may find ourselves in different positions. So it just makes sense to be aware of all of ourselves. And Dwayne says this constantly, that we should get to know our 5 bodies, each of our bodies, because each of them has a life here in creation. So get to know them, get to know how they are, their responses, their reactions to things, so that we can better handle and manage creation. Because it's imploding. It's becoming a lot harder to live here. It's very challenging. But everybody can do it. Just sing the NUUU, and life will show you. It goes like this: NUUU. Kevin? NUUU. Thanks again, Kevin.